Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This I'm going to go through my top 50 running backs and just sort of break it into a tier list here. This is sort of a rankings video, but it's also sort of explaining to you guys where I find the big gaps or differences to be in just between two running backs. Like typically, it's not fair necessarily to assume that the running back 8 is really similar to the running back 9, for example. Typically, there's going to be a huge drop off at some point. You're going to see a lot of those, and I think that's why it's really important to break your any sort of rankings you go into your draft with, whether or not it's mine, whether or not it's just a default rankings. I think it's really important to sort of define tiers for yourself because that's going to be where you can really capture the value. As a general rule of thumb, I always say you don't want to be the first person to take a player from a new tier. That means that you spent the highest draft capital out of anybody that's drafting a player in that tier. So like if there's 6 running backs in tier 2, ideally you're trying to get the guy, the 6th best one, or the 6th latest one, because in theory you got the same caliber of player and you just got them later. So I find tier-based rankings to be super beneficial for myself. Hopefully you guys like this as well. If you have any comments or questions, let me know in the comments below. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Let's get into it. So I'll start things off here with tier 1 for me. These are just the studs. These are the guys that I think all have a really great shot to finish this season as the running back 1 overall, and I honestly have no real preference in terms of how you want to rank them 1 through 3. For me, it's Bijan Robinson. We know what Bijan can do. He's going to be probably the safest of the 3 players in this tier. He's clearly the focal point of the offense in Atlanta. There's a little bit of uncertainty surrounding what they're going to look like with Michael Penix, but it's really splitting hairs there. We know that Bijan's an incredibly talented player. He's 23 years old. Already looks like a superstar. Had 1,900 total yards last year. I don't think people realize how fantastic he was, and there's even more ceiling there on top of that if he can maybe have a couple more breakaway runs. Hasn't really had those yet so far in his career, but I don't think there's any reason he can't. His offense could certainly be better as well. He has yet to be a part of a good offense, and he could finally be if Penix ends up being good. So lots of upside there. Jahmyr Gibbs also falls into this tier just because he's by far the most efficient player on a per touch basis in the running back position across the entire league. A fantastic player, part of a great offense. If you want to take him as the running back 1 overall, I've got no problem there. And then Saquon, obviously the guy who finished it last as the RB1 last season, running it back again this year with basically the same exact circumstance. Only concern there would be age just a little bit. I believe he's 27 or 28 now. And on top of that, you're looking at a situation where he did have a career high in touches last season. He's also not historically been the most durable running back. He certainly missed a lot of time over the course of his career. There would be at least a more significant injury concern for me with Saquon and the other 2. So I think he's actually the riskiest of the 3, even though he's probably being drafted the highest of all 3 of them. Next up for me, we've got tier 2, and these are 5 guys that I think all have a pretty great shot to potentially crack into the top 3 and finish the season as guys that really should have been drafted in tier 1. Again, in no particular order, the way I'm listing these guys off for me, we'll start things off with Ashton Jeanty, who's got a fantastic shot to just be one of the players that leads the position across the whole league in touches. Volume is king in the NFL, especially at the running back position. If he ends up getting 450 total opportunities over the course of the season, that's maybe a stretch, but it's also in the range of outcomes for a guy like him. That would certainly make him a locked-in guy as a guy that has a shot to be a top 3 back, especially if the Raiders are just decent on offense. Devon Achane, especially with the removal of Jonnu Smith from the offense. We might see 100 targets for Devon Achane. Couple that with how explosive of an athlete he is. Maybe slightly better offensive production out of the Dolphins in general. You got a lot of touchdown upside, a lot of volume there. Explosive player. Achane's got a ton of ceiling as well. Derrick Henry, not going to catch passes really, but he's one of the few players in the NFL that could finish this year with 20-plus rushing touchdowns, could rush for 2,000 yards as well, so he deserves to be in this tier for sure. Then you got Jonathan Taylor and Bucky Irving. Jonathan Taylor, not a fantastic offense that he's probably a part of, but he's also just an incredibly talented player. They're more than willing to just force feed him the ball. With Daniel Jones at quarterback, I think it gives you just a little bit of an increased production in terms of the receiving department as well. We've seen him be the running back 1 over the course of the season before. That could certainly happen again this year. And then Bucky Irving, just an extremely talented player on a really good offense. They will be missing Tristan Wirfs for a few weeks to start the year, so makes me a little bit wary of what this offense might start out as, but in general, I think Bucky's fantastic. He's got a shot to break into the top 3 if he just ends up getting workhorse volume here, and I think he belongs in this tier, although you could make an argument maybe he belongs 1 tier lower. Next up, we've got tier 3 for myself here, and this is going to be 6 guys that I think are probably going to finish as low-end running back 1s. Pretty different players here. I think, honestly, there's a case to be made that, 4 of these 6 players are really similar and that I don't really know how talented they are, but they're going to be workhorse running backs and really good offenses. And then 2 running backs that I think just to have a little bit of a wide range of outcomes. Christian McCaffrey, obviously the widest range of outcomes of any one of these guys. I think there's an argument to be made if you want to. You could put Christian McCaffrey in tier 1. For me, the risk is just way too high there. I think that for a player at his age who's honestly, we haven't seen him do a whole lot now in 2 years. I mean, he missed most of last season. We've seen him miss a lot of time over the course of his career as well. There's just a lot of potential red flags there, and I think that even if he comes back and is fully healthy, they're probably going to look to use Isaac Grendo just a little bit more than they historically have used in other players. It just makes sense. You want to save McCaffrey. This is a team with an incredibly easy schedule. They're going to want to make sure that they're healthy come playoffs, assuming they make it there, and there's just no reason for them to give Christian McCaffrey 25 touches a week. Josh Jacobs, fantastic player. I do think we'll see a little bit of reduced touchdown production from him out of this season, along with probably just a little bit less volume as well, with Marshawn Lloyd staying healthy. Hopefully they can pass the ball a little bit better as well. So should just be a little bit less run heavy. But in general, I think Josh Jacobs is a great option. It's like a low end running back 1. Chase Brown also belongs in this tier. Looked really great to me last season, but I think he does sort of have like a sneaky addition of a competition for touches on this roster. They drafted Taj Brooks, later round draft pick. That doesn't really scare me, but they also added Samaje Perine. Not a fantastic player, but a guy who is going to slot in on third downs on occasion. And they do have Zach Moss coming back, who's not a fantastic player by any means, but like that's just between those three. That's a lot more competition for touches than what he had with Khalil Herbert behind him last season. So he's obviously going to be the clear lead back in this offense, but I think there's a path towards him having like maybe a 60 to 70% snap share instead of like the 90% snap share he was at the end of last year, and that would be a pretty big hit for him. I think Kyren Williams is really similar to Chase Brown in that regard. He's a guy who, again, not the most explosive player, just a guy who really gets the job done, and the Rams obviously love him, but they did add Jaquez Hunter. You got Blake Corum still there. I think they want to use more running backs, and I think especially because you're not going to see a whole lot of passing volume to the running back position here, you need Kyren to continue to fall in the end zone the way he has, and if he just doesn't get lucky with touchdown production, that could certainly be a little bit scary. Chuba Hubbard, honestly, my favorite value of all the guys on this list. He's up way higher than where he's being drafted relative to ADP right here. So Chuba is a guy that I think I'm going to end up with a lot of. I think he's just a really good player on an offense that I think should improve this season. So he's a great value for me. I would take him. I think there's a case to be made. He's as good as any of the players on this list. Probably near the bottom of this tier, but I still think he belongs in this tier here. As does Joe Mixon, a guy who we saw be a top 3 running back for most of last season before he was dealing with injury. Again, he is dealing with a foot and ankle injury still right now, and at his age, that's certainly not something we want to see, but it's still July. I think there's plenty of time for him to be healthy. He's played at least 14 games all but 1 year of his entire career, so even though he's getting older, I still trust him to hold up to that workload. Just going to be a reliable high-end running back 2, low-end running back 1, and there is volume if this Texans offense can bounce back a little bit. A lot of upside. I think Joe Mixon could be fantastic as well, so I think he belongs in this tier for sure. Next, we're getting into a bit of a scarier tier, a tier of players that I definitely don't want to leave the draft with as my running back 1. I think every player we've talked about so far, if you left the draft with them as your running back 1, there's a case to be made that you'll be just fine there. But when we get to this tier, you better have been basically going RB0 if you get to this point. You're drafting these guys as your RB1. So we'll start things off with James Cook, a really fantastic player. Obviously, had a huge season last year. I was all over him last year in the offseason, and I'm glad that one worked out for us. But it's tough to look back on that and say he didn't just get incredibly lucky from a touchdown standpoint. He got really unlucky the first 2 years of his career, obviously, finishing with 2 rushing touchdowns each of those 2 years. But getting 16 last season as well was a clear outlier. I think we'll see him sort of fall back to like that 6 to 8 touchdown range this season. Not to mention Ray Davis is fantastic. He looked great. Ty Johnson is still going to feature and catch passes. So, and you've got the sort of contract situation hovering over James Cook. I think he's probably like a mid-tier running back 2. He's got some upside if things break right again, but just a little bit scary there for me with James Cook. Breece Hall, not a guy I find myself drafting a whole lot of. I think you're going to have really limited touchdown upside in this offense. Probably not going to catch the ball a whole lot with Justin Fields at quarterback, so there's a lot of concern there, but we've seen him be a top-tier player, so he certainly sort of slots into this tier just because we know the upside's there, because we've seen it happen, and he's not old enough that he should have like been washed or anything yet, but there's just some reason to be concerned there for sure. Marion Hampton, I think clearly an elite running back. I think he's going to at some point take over the full workhorse role in this Chargers offense, and it's going to be really good for fantasy when that happens. But the thing is, we might get through this entire year without that happening. Najee Harris is a reliable player, doesn't really get hurt aside from that firework incident that just happened, but it sounds like that's not a huge deal. He should be good to go for the start of the season. You're going to have like a 1A, 1B situation with Hampton as the 1A, but this is a team that I think they're going to want to run the ball a lot, and they have a lot of reason to use Najee Harris because he's okay. He's good enough to get the job done. He's way better than anything they had on the roster last year, and I think they'll want to make sure they're just keeping everybody healthy for the playoffs because this is a team in Los Angeles that certainly expects to be there. I think Hampton, if Najee went down or if he did steal that workhorse role early, he's got like top 5 upside legitimately in his range of outcomes, but there's also just a chance to take a low-end running back 2 all year. James Conner belongs in this tier because he can honestly be a running back 1 if he stays healthy. We've seen him do that before, but there's just at this age, it feels like at some point he's going to miss some time. He's never played a full season in his whole career. So you probably have like a high-end running back 2 for the games he plays, and then he's obviously going to miss some time this season. David Montgomery finishes the running back 12 and running back 13 each of the last 2 seasons. Tons of upside there, but again, it's just a little bit of uncertainty. You've got the loss of Frank Ragnow. You've got the loss of Ben Johnson. This is a team that could certainly at least look to use Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more. But I think David Montgomery's fantastic. He belongs in this tier, and he also drafted the second latest of anybody here, so great value for Montgomery still. And then DeAndre Swift, by far the lowest drafted player that I'm putting in this tier. He's a guy that should, in my mind, be a full-time back in what should be a really good offense in Chicago. He fits into this wide range of outcomes tier because we don't necessarily know what this Bears offense is going to look like, but I think there's legitimate RB1 upside in there for DeAndre Swift, and I think the PPR volume is going to be there enough that I think you're pretty safe with at least like a low-end running back 2 production, even if things don't really break right for him this year. Moving on to tier 5 here, we've got these guys are just players that I'm categorizing as like solid low-end running back 2s, guys that I'll feel okay about starting every week, but not guys that I think really have it in them to really be league winners. Kenneth Walker starts there. Probably has the most upside of any player on this list, but it's just I don't believe he's going to be able to stay healthy. I think you draft him as your RB2. You basically get like low-end running back 1, high-end RB2 production while he's healthy, and then he's probably going to miss 6 or 7 games, and then you're going to be hurting and hoping you have Zach Charbonnet there. So just tough to read at Walker. I think he belongs in this tier of player, though. Alvin Kamara, really similar. Probably just has like low-end RB2 written all over him this season. I think he's going to PPR his way to being good enough, but I don't see a whole lot of touchdown upside there. He is getting older. Injury risk is certainly there, so I don't love drafting him this season or Kenneth Walker. They're both being drafted way ahead of everybody else on this list here in this tier, so I'm not drafting much of them, but they do certainly have some upside, and they definitely are going to be starting assets for us in fantasy this year. RJ Harvey, I thought about putting him in tier 4 because he does certainly have that really wide range of outcomes, but I just wouldn't draft him with those guys. He's a guy that I'm really excited about. I think he's a talented player. Should be a focal point of a really good offense here in Denver, but there are just a lot of question marks there. They brought in J.K. Dobbins. It's possible that you have R.J. Harvey effectively as a passing down only guy, and we've seen that be valuable in Sean Payton offenses before. Think back to like Reggie Bush. You had Alvin Kamara sort of play that passing down role with Mark Ingram for years. So it's possible that R.J. Harvey can still be fantastic. So I think he's just like a solid RB2 with upside built in if things break right. But there's also downside where he might just not be a reliable weekly starter if things go poorly and if J.K. Dobbins ends up being really good for them. And then Brian Robinson, Tony Pollard, really similar. They're guys that I think aren't special players but are going to have really valuable roles in fantasy. Brian Robinson, the clear lead back on what should be a really good offense. Not extremely talented, not going to catch a ton of passes, but he's going to get the job done. I think he'll be a guy you can play as your RB2 every single week. And if you draft him as an RB3, I think you're going to feel really comfortable with that. And Tony Pollard sort of fits the same bill. I think he's a better player than Brian Robinson. Should get a higher touch share in that offense, but it's a worse offense, less touchdown upside. But still, low-end RB2 has written all over both those guys. So guys that I think I feel pretty good about as like my RB3, or if I go light on running back as low-end RB2s for my roster. Next up, we're into tier 6 here, and for me, these are the last 6 players that I think you can draft and feel okay having to start them in week 1 this season. So I'll start things off with 2 rookies. Honestly, I could just say 3 rookies: Travion Henderson, Quinshawn Judkins, and Caleb Johnson. I think it's going to get better for all 3 of these guys over the course of the season. These are guys that generally rookie running backs and just rookies in general take a little bit of time to acclimate here. With Travion Henderson, you've got Ramondre Stevenson there sort of fighting him off. I think you're going to have a 1A, 1B situation there with Henderson being the 1A. You can start him. He's incredibly talented, but there are a lot of question marks. I would prefer to draft him as my running back 3 and sort of wait and see before I start him in week 1. But if you had to, I think you could do that. Quinshon Judkins should immediately be the full-time starter, honestly, in Cleveland. A report came out earlier this week about Jerome Ford looking like a guy that might start early on in the year. That seems really silly to me for a guy that was had to take a pay cut to come back to the roster. Like, they were okay letting him walk, and they also drafted Dylan Sampson as well. So I think that's kind of smoke and mirrors. I think Judkins will probably be a full-time player, but just on a horrendous offense. So not a ton of upside there, but he almost fits like the Tony Pollard role of a good player on a crappy offense that's just going to get a lot of work. Caleb Johnson then as well. Warren's probably going to be like about a 50-50 split with him. I think Caleb Johnson is a better player than Jaylen Warren, but again, you're probably on a mediocre offense in a timeshare. I don't love it. I'd prefer to not start Caleb Johnson week 1, but you could if you needed to. Aaron Jones should be the week 1 starter here. It's going to be, again, a 1A, 1B situation with him and Jordan Mason. This Vikings offense, however, is fantastic, and Aaron Jones is a guy that if you need to start as your running back 2, I think you could do a lot worse. I don't see a lot of upside for him this season, especially because I think Jordan Mason is a more talented runner at least. So I don't love it, but you can start Aaron Jones in week 1 if you have to. Tyrone Tracy, again, question marks there between him and Cam Scatabo, but Tracy looked like the real deal to me last season. I think he's a really good player, great pass catcher. We'll see how involved Scatabo is. It's really curious to see how that backfield shakes out, because I don't think the offense is going to be good enough to support both of them, but I think one of them is probably going to end up being fantasy relevant. My bet would be on Tracy, although I do really like Scatabo as well. You could go either way there, but I think if you have to start Tracy in week 1, you can do that. And then Travis Etienne, I'm going to put him here. I think you can start him in week 1 just because I feel like he's pretty safe to have that passing down role in Jacksonville. I think that's going to be really valuable. We've seen it be valuable enough to warrant starting in the Liam Cohen offense. Like, Rachaad White was valuable for fantasy last season, even though Bucky Irving broke out. So I think that's sort of the floor for Etienne, and there is a path towards him breaking back to being the top tier player. So Etienne's a guy, if you draft, it's like a go late running back, draft him as your running back 2. You can break glass and start him in week 1 if you need to. Next up, we've got 6 players here in Tier 7 that I've got question marks surrounding, but I think have a somewhat clear path towards being reliable starters for us this year. Cam Scatabo, I almost put him and Tyrone Tracy in this list, but I think Scatabo is a guy who's a really talented player. It's just interesting to see how this Giants offense shakes out, how that backfield shakes out, but he's a good player. I think he's a guy that could be relevant for sure. Jaylen Warren, you got the same thing here. You'll notice this list is basically like the 1B for a lot of the players in Tier 6. But Jaylen Warren, we'll see how that workload shifts between him and Caleb Johnson. I think he's probably going to be primarily the passing down back. It'll probably be a pretty clear 50-50 split, and he'll be a guy you can flex or use as a low-end running back 2 in a pinch if you need to. Jordan Mason probably has the most upside of any player on this list. Has a chance, like if Aaron Jones went down, I think Jordan Mason could potentially be a top 10 running back. So I love Jordan Mason. He's definitely somebody that I'm targeting, but if Aaron Jones is healthy, he could easily be a guy that gets 10 carries a game and 1 target, and you're not going to be super fantasy relevant if that happens. Ramondre Stevenson, again, probably the 1B to Travion Henderson, although I think at the start of the year he'll probably be a little bit more valuable. He is, however, 1 fumble away from being just eternally benched by Mike Vrabel, so definitely question marks there, but he's a guy that I think you can start in a pinch if you need to. J.K. Dobbins could be potentially the starting running back here in Denver. I didn't think he looked all that good last season. I know he had a great year. Fun story. Rooting for him, obviously, coming off the torn Achilles. So great to see him, sort of resurrect his career a little bit. But after week 2, he averaged 3.7 yards per carry. He was not great after a couple breakaway runs he had early on in the year. This was a team in Los Angeles that really wanted to run the ball. They emphasized trying to do it, and they couldn't. That's why they had to sort of turn towards Justin Herbert sort of airing the ball out. And I just don't think that this offense in Denver wants to be any more run-heavy than Los Angeles was last season. So I don't think J.K. Dobbins has a whole lot of upside, but I see it potentially breaking right where if Dobbins maybe takes another step forward from a health standpoint, maybe he's a little bit more explosive this year. He could be good this year. It's just I don't really buy it. And then Isaiah Pacheco. Has to be on this list because at least as it stands right now, he's probably the week 1 starter in Kansas City. That being said, there's a lot of names there. You've obviously got Kareem Hunt still there. You've got Elijah Mitchell. They drafted a rookie, Brashard Smith, that I like quite a bit. Should be the passing down back in my mind. I don't think Pacheco is going to be a reliable weekly starter, but again, one of the things I like to tell you guys to do is draft running backs on good offenses from ambiguous backfields. The Chiefs they scream that right now. Kareem Hunt was really good for fantasy last season, and he's not a very good player. So if Pacheco comes back and is fully healthy, there's at least a path towards Pacheco being good for fantasy, so I don't want to completely write him off. But again, it's a crowded backfield. I'm sure there's going to be value in it, but I just don't know who it's going to come from this year. And the last tier I'm going to touch on here, this is the biggest tier. This will close out 50 players that will go over here. I believe there's, 10 or 12 players in this? Looks like 12 players total in this tier. This is just guys that I think all still deserve to be drafted. They're guys that I think have clear paths towards being relevant, but they're not guys that I want to start in week 1 right out of the gate. They're guys that sort of need something to shift around ahead of them or around them for them to be usable. Tyjae Spears, I've talked about him quite a bit. I think he's an explosive player, a guy you can play in a pinch if you need to, but really we need an injury to happen to Tony Pollard or for him to overtake him to actually be relevant. Rachaad White, again, a guy you can start in a pinch if you have to, but really you're just hoping for a Bucky injury with Rachaad White. Bishal Tootin, he maybe could start right out of the gate. He and Etienne sort of fighting it out for the starting role, as is Tank Bigsby, who certainly could have been on this list as well. Again, ambiguous backfield, good offense. I think Bishal Tootin's a great target, but as far as I view him right now, I think he's basically a handcuff. But again, that's why handcuffs are in parentheses or quotations there. Tootin could actually just be the starter week 1, so he should be drafted for sure. Both Jadon Blue and Javonte Williams for me belong in this list. You could even put Miles Sanders on there. Cowboys backfield, again, ambiguous backfield, great offense. Somebody's going to be fantasy relevant. My bet is on Jadon Blue, but Javonte Williams needs to be drafted as well just because there's a shot there. Zach Charbonnet, Tyler Algier, clear handcuffs to potentially having workhorse roles. Like if you have Algier and Bijan goes down, you might have a top 10 running back immediately. Zach Charbonnet, top 12 running back if Kenneth Walker goes down. So both those guys need to be drafted. Austin Eckler, again, it's kind of like a Tyjae Spears role. You can flex him if you need to, especially in PPR, but really you're looking at just hoping he's more valuable if Brian Robinson goes down. That being said, Eckler isn't going to get a full workhorse role even if Brian Robinson goes down. So I think he needs to be drafted. He'll get a little bit of a bump if Brian Robinson goes down, but he's not really a true handcuff there. Isaac Guerendo, really important handcuff this season, especially if you draft Christian McCaffrey. I don't normally advise saying you have to draft a handcuff for your running back, but as far as I'm concerned, if you draft Christian McCaffrey, you have to draft Isaac Guerendo as well, unless it's in best ball or something, because you're just playing for pure ceiling in that case. But in a redraft, if you're taking Christian McCaffrey, just reach on by a round on Guerendo. It's just worth doing. You're going to sleep a lot better at night. Ray Davis, he's a guy that I think needs to be drafted as well. Again, I think James Cook is not necessarily helping himself with this whole contract situation. You're giving Ray Davis more opportunity to get things up and running in practice. I think Ray Davis is a really talented player. There's a ton of upside if James Cook went down. We saw that last year. He had a 150-yard game in his one start. So like Ray Davis a lot. Trey Benson, clear handcuff to James Conner, needs to be drafted. You've got an aging, injury-prone running back, and Trey Benson looked okay last season, and supposedly has been turning heads in training camp this season. And then Justice Hill, not really a handcuff, because I don't know if there really is a handcuff in Baltimore for a Derrick Henry injury. You've got Keaton Mitchell, you've got Justice Hill. I feel like they would bring a running back in to fill that role as well, but as it stands right now, you can flex Justice Hill if you need to, especially in the full PPR. And if Derrick Henry were to go down, I think you would see Justice Hill get a decent amount of work. So I like him as well. So that'll do it for the running back tier list here. We went over the top 50 running backs in my rankings this year. Broke them into tier lists for you guys. Hopefully you guys found that helpful. If you guys want to see more videos like this, there will be a wide receiver tier list coming out shortly, along with a quarterback and a tight end tier list. So stay tuned for those. Super fun doing these. Again, I think tier-based rankings are the best way to go about things because it's really helpful in drafts, understanding where those drop-offs are so you can make sure you take the right position each draft pick as well. Understanding hey, if there's 10 running backs left in the same tier, and you only want one of them, you don't need to force that pick in one round. You can wait around and get the next one later. So really valuable there. If you have any comments or disagreements, I know there was maybe some spicy or hot takes there in that. Let me know. I love interacting with you guys, seeing if we can come to a consensus. And just a lot of fun here. We're in July, got 2 months, I think less than 2 months until the NFL season actually kicks off. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We're really going to get into the heat of draft season, and I'm super stoked. So appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter @RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.